Thanks for tuning in to Andrea in the Morning. This is Andrea Raquel, the social entrepreneur and sugar-free coach. Thank you for joining me. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in and following. I hope you've liked our page on Facebook. That's facebook.com/sugar-free coach, as well as on Twitter. You can catch me on Twitter at sugar-free coach. I will follow back and reciprocate. I always do. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. You are listening to another episode of the Living Sugar-Free Lifestyle Show, Andrea in the Morning. And this is our third episode in the series, creators and writers and all types of just brilliant minds, whether it be filmmakers or illustrators. This is our writing series or creator series. We haven't really, decided on a name for the whole thing because it's becoming more and more diverse as more people get involved. This is the third episode, and today we're going to be speaking with Daniel Chapman. He is an author, a musician, and a microbiologist. I've read two of his books. One is Can You Find a Four-Leaf Clover? And the other is Teach a Girl to Fish. Very excited to share with you this interview, and I hope you appreciate it. Be sure to go back and listen to the previous episodes. The first couple episodes in this series, we spoke with Brian Cutter, and actually we're going to be sharing a clip with you from him as well, because as I promised, you can continue to ask questions, and my awesome guests are going to continue to answer them for you. So today we're going to be talking about quite a bit, and it's all relevant, and everything builds on each other. So if you haven't listened to the previous episodes, go back and do that. If you haven't picked up your copy of Living Sugar-Free Revealed Aspie Secrets, that's available on Amazon. And of course, you can find all these links from my website. Be sure to follow, share, click like, and let my wonderful guests know how much you appreciate them sharing their heart, their perspective with you. And after the break, we're going to get into it with Daniel, and he's just such an amazing guy. I'm so very excited, and I appreciate his perspective so much. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Happy Friday. Today we are talking with Daniel Chapman. He is an author. He's an artist, musician. He is, oh my goodness, a published author, I should have said. He's a musician, producer, I believe, and microbiologist. Correct me if I'm wrong, sir.
Yep.
Right.
I do. I dabble in a little bit of everything.
That is so awesome. I mean, it's really, to have, what do they used to call it, a polymath, to have a talent in the arts, but also to have a scientific mind. That's a very unique mix. So, I'm on the spectrum. I just recently, as an adult, was diagnosed with autism on the Asperger's end of the spectrum, however you want to word that. And I'm also a veteran, PTSD, and I know that we have some similarities in common. So I'll just let you, tell a little bit about yourself, and then I'll ask some specific questions and let you get in my hot seat. How's that?
Sounds perfect. Actually, I was just diagnosed in my 2017, to be exact, right around when I published my first book, Can You Find a Four-Leaf Clover? I was dealing with some things, I guess, some not typical. They were normal tendencies for me, but my fiance kind of looked at me and was like, you're kind of a little bit angrier than I'm used to, maybe. And it was sound advice, honestly. So I kind of sat down with the therapist, and I was like, look, I've sat in a therapist's office before. They told me things. I told them I don't believe in those things. I do my own research. So whatever you're going to tell me, just know I'm going to research first. She kind of let me talk for like a month straight, and then just kind of casually looked at me. I was like, "Hey, I want you to consider something." Uh, and it was eye-opening. It was terrifying at first. Probably spent a good 3, 4, 6 months, if I'm being honest with myself, uh, in kind of a crisis mode. Like, oh my God, what does this mean now? And then recently, over the past year or so, I've been kind of working on acceptance, understanding that it changes nothing about me. I am who I've always been. That is true. That autism is a spectrum disorder. Uh, that is what the ASD stands for. And being on the spectrum means no brain functions a little bit better, I like to
I think so too.
think.
It's nice to hear someone else say that. Of course, you have your birds of a feather, and eventually you come across various people who are like-minded. But it's nice to meet a total stranger that I don't have to try to convince that your uniqueness is quite possibly a gift if you're able to
Oh
tap
my
into
God,
it.
yes.
Yeah, excellent.
But
Okay. So you said your fiance, you said then are you fianced or are you married?
fianced, soon to
Okay. Y'all, he's off the market, so don't be stalking him,
be.
okay?
Yeah, definitely soon to be.
Now, did you write? Okay, so you guys, I've read both of his books, and I'm here to tell you, I mean, if you have children, even if you don't have children, if you're just like a kid at heart like I am, you should read both of them. They're very quick reads, and you actually feel good after you read them. Some things that you read and they kind of leave you heavy, you feel good after you read both of these books. So I want to ask you, Teach a Girl to Fish, did you actually write that about your daughter?
Funny thing, I actually don't have any children.
Oh, well, that's even more
Yeah, my
impressive.
best friend actually just messaged me today and was like, because she just got her copy and read it, and was like, if I didn't know you didn't have children, I would think you had a daughter. And I was like, well, that just means it was written on mine who recently had a daughter, and he read my first book, and then he asked me if I could do something around the realm of a dad and daughter fishing.
Oh, wow.
So I tapped in. I have some experiences. A cousin I grew up with, I know fishing is one of her favorite things to do. She used to do it all the time with my grandfather, who my first book was written about. And then my fiance, it's actually one of her favorite things to do. Uh, I'm sorry. And she used to go all of the time and tells me all of those stories about how she went to fishing with her grandfather and her other mom, and how these experiences build up. And then I thought about how I would like to raise a child when I eventually have them. Um, so luckily, it all came together and worked out for the best.
Well, I love fishing too, and I grew up fishing, and everything that you read hit home for me. I actually hooked my big sister, in the hand when we first went fishing when we were young. But it just was so amazing. I love, love, love that book. I mean, it left me wanting more, to be honest with you. So I don't know if maybe you could do a sequel. I don't know. I don't know how y'all feel about that now. He doesn't have children, for those of y'all that have children, but I don't think you necessarily have to live in someone's shoes to be able to empathize and relate. I really don't. How do you feel about
Right.
that?
I believe it's important to share in those experiences. I think it's something. The human experience is unique in that we all find a way to be detached from. We all like to live in our little niches and feel that because this is my thing, nobody else can understand it or experience it. But I feel like that kind of blocks people from being able to understand and experience it. So I like to try myself specifically to try and put myself in shoes that are unfamiliar to me. Um, and I don't have kids now, but I will one day. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
so I don't think it's far fetched for me to daydream about what that would be like. My mom likes to say this the saying that she has, that they don't have a manual on raising kids. And I think that is the truest, craziest saying I've ever heard. Uh, so
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of up to us to build one. And I think that's really where it comes into play, the whole "it takes a village to raise a child" thing. You're going to have people who don't have kids, but who understand what it's like to live a childhood. Um, and I think we should really allow ourselves to open ourselves and those around us and under us to those experiences so they can have a full, real, active, healthy childhood.
That's good word right there, and I agree with you 100%. That's excellent. I mean, um, there's a lot of different scenarios and current events, and I mean that what you just said, we can apply that to so many different things, and it could really help so many people right now, really, because your solution, your help, your advice, your education, your example, your blessing, whatever the thing is that you need, it's not going to necessarily come from someone exactly like you or who's been everywhere you've been. As a matter of fact, it's likely not to. If you want something you've never had, you got to go somewhere you've never been,
Right.
right? So tell me about this microbiology thing. I mean, what does that entail? I have no idea. I mean, I know what biology is, and I assume microbiology is at a more micro level. I mean, a more detailed. Are you dealing with amoeba? I mean, what? I mean, I don't know if it's top secret, but tell us as much as you can.
No secret. No secrets. I got technology. Actually pursuing med school coming up in planning on taking the MCAT the beginning of the year 2020. I'm planning on enrolling in med school by the end of 2020. But I wanted to do something different than just going the pre-med route. Basically, pre-med is just a bunch of science classes. And though I love a bunch of science classes, I love application way more. So I wanted to do
Mm-hmm.
where I could apply the information I was learning while also trying to grow further. So I went to school for biology and then had a teacher pull me aside and was like, "Hey, why don't you think about biology?" So she threw me in a couple of biotech classes, and my first classes were of microbiology. And I found it so interesting how you could take small cells, bacteria, mold, yeast, and manipulate them into being useful products for society in general. So my interest grew in that, and I have a natural love for food, and microbiology and food kind of like go hand in hand a lot of times.
Wow. Y'all know I don't get speechless. We do not have enough time for all of the questions that just popped into my head. And you guys, my audience knows me. We don't worry about background sound. We don't worry about technology issues. You might hear my puppy barking in the background, whatever. We're just doing this casually. So I always have a list of questions to ask people, but usually, lucky me, I get people that are so fascinating to me. Never mind all those basic questions. I want to know about this, because I didn't know these things before now. But I can't. I can't even go into all of the list of questions. You're going to have to come back. You're going to have to do what I did with the first guest that we had for the writing series. I put it out there that people could ask questions, and I'm telling y'all the same thing. Hopefully, Daniel doesn't mind. If you have questions,
send them in, send them through Instagram. Preferably go to our Anchor site and ask the questions. You can send a message and we'll air your question on the air, or you could just, type a message or whatever. And I'll try to get Daniel to answer the questions because, for the writers, for the autistic people, I mean, so many different things, you guys. So this is my second interview with someone who's in a multicultural relationship. So in the current events of the day, Daniel, I'm Miss Champion. People call me whitewash, which I'm not. I went to Spelman College, I know my history. I grew up around all Black people, et cetera, but I always also grew up around a lot of white people. And I went to high school where it was like I was the only Black girl, but it wasn't a lot of Americans. It was all, Ethiopian and Indian and Chinese and Japanese and every kind of nationality that you could imagine. And so the hairs kind of stand up on my back when I'm in a situation where people are being biased, but not racist. I'm talking about Black people being biased against white people. And so I find myself in a lot of arguments, discussions, debates, and what have you. And so I just think it's very interesting that my first two interviews, y'all, I did not do this on purpose. My first interview is a white American who's married to a Black American. And is your fiance, is she American or is she of another nationality?
She is American.
And so no Italian, French, no other, half and half or anything
Nope.
like that. And are you American? No, you're not like from the islands or anything
Nope,
like that?
100% American.
See, and y'all, I ask because you don't know. Just because somebody speaks like they sound like they have an American accent or because they look a certain color, you don't know. So I always ask. So first I had a white American male that's married to a Black American female. And now I have a Black American male that's married to a white American female. So we are covering all of the areas. And, hopefully I'm going to have this, I think she's from Salvador, who I'm reading her book right now. She's amazing. But you guys, my goal is to give you an insight into all these different people and how we come together, like Daniel just described, by finding the common ground. So we're both autistic, for example. Yes, you're a male, I'm a female, whatever. But we all have something in common and a place that we can find common ground on. And so I want to talk more about now. I'm going to shift. I'm going to do a break because we're at 15 minutes. And I'll, after that little quote, I'll do a break. But when I come back, I'm going to ask you another question. We'll go a whole different direction. So now you can breathe, grab a sip of water, do whatever you want to do. If you want to say anything, does it sound good? Or you want to ask me anything or anything like that, we'll take a beat and I'll edit it.
How'd your trip to the VA go?
Okay, all in all, it was good. I can't complain. The nurse was very nice. Hopefully it's positive. I think she's probably going to give me a good report. When I say good report, recommend me for approval. But I didn't know I was seeing a nurse. And not a lot of people will relate to this, but I know you will. You don't tell somebody that they're going to go to a meeting where somebody's going to ask some questions and then they get there and have to take their clothes off. You don't do that. You prepare me for that so I can have my mind right. And so the guy, when he made the appointment, told me that I was just going in for like an interview, asked but I got there and she's like, okay, you can take your top off and put the gown on now. And I kind of was like, breathe. Okay. Whatever. So, that was weird. And then when I first got there, I think you probably saw the post, the guy asked me when I asked him where the claims office was, he asked me if I needed the lost and found, like I lost something, like we're at a VA hospital, but you're still not assuming that I'm a veteran. Come on, dude, snap out of it. But it was nice because afterwards, I dropped something I was looking for, and he walked up and asked me what I was looking for. And I looked up and saw him, and I was like, oh, you're on point this time. I was like, because when I first came in, you asked me if I had lost something. He was like, yeah, that was me. I said, okay, but don't do that to no other females that come to the VA. That's not cool. He said, I know. I'm sorry. You're right. So I felt better, after that. And then my mama took me to Cracker Barrel, so I'm good now. It was the perfect day to get all that off of me before I had my interview, so I could be, comfortable and really focus in on your story and everything. Because, wow. Okay, so I'm going to come back from the break now. Enough about me. We're back from the break, you guys. Y'all know we were talking, and I was talking his head off while we were on break. But so much I want to ask you. Daniel is not only an author, and I've read both his books and they're awesome, and he's also a microbiologist, you guys, but he's also a musician and producer.
I have been producing my own music, self.
I've been investigating. I thought I saw that. Tell me more about that. And while you're telling me about your music, we want to know, the audience wants to know, I guess I don't want to say we, because people kind of say the same thing about me. Like, you do too much, you find that. I mean, and it's interesting because I'm not ADHD. I'm not like on multiple places on the spectrum, which some people are, and it's unique. But being autistic and being attention deficit, not ADHD, but ADD, can be very similar and can show up in very similar ways. And so for me, I can identify, and our other guest was explaining, Brian was explaining, his reason for working on 50 million projects at one time. But, do you feel that it's something that you have to do? Do you feel like it's something that you're able to do? How do you do all of this?
Purely off the strength of will. I do it mostly because I can. I grew up in a family where attentions were kind of running all over the. It was a lot of kind of snap. Now your attention's on something else. Snap. Now your attention's on something else. And then I kind of fell in love with just like doing so much, and I find it hard to give up doing any part of what I love. And I get it a lot of time too. Why do you try and do so much? Like, why do you want to be the rapping poet, author, doctor? And my response is simply, look, in the 1700s, 1800s, whatever, a lot of the famous scientists we idolize about weren't just scientists. They were scientists and inventors and painters and musicians and all of this. And I find the notion ridiculous now that we all of a sudden have to confine ourselves to being or doing one thing. And then I kind of started with poetry in fifth grade. I was kind of forced into a club, and then I wrote this very, very awful poem. I will admit, but because I'm a try harder, and it made me really want to doing it. That way, I wasn't bad at it anymore. And then my brother got into music, and my brother's kind of like I hate to say out loud, but he's kind of like my idol. So I kind of was like, well, you do music, I want to do music too. And I felt really cool doing music, but realized that I wasn't quite good at that. So I wanted to get better, and kept doing it and doing it. And the more I do it, the more I fall in love with it. As in, the more, I think that's true for anything that you get good at. The better you get at something, the more you enjoy doing it. So I think because I just enjoy being bad at stuff, it makes me want to do it more, and then I get good at it and I enjoy it even more.
That's something that I can definitely relate to. We have when people say, that whole question about your strengths and your weaknesses, or what things are you really good at. But like whatever I do, that it's almost like this little, and it's not a perfection thing. It's not really a competition with anyone else. It's just this obsession with mastering the thing. Yeah. And the whole polymath thing, I totally get. I mean, I was just maybe watching a documentary, I think it was the other day, and they were talking about, and I really had never read much up on this or saw this, but they were talking about the Mayan calendar and the Iron Age and all these different ages and going into an Enlightenment age. And they were talking about a matriarchal society versus a patriarchal society. And they were talking about how during that time, during the Egyptian age or the empires, everyone was creative. It wasn't just, if you were an artist or if you were on television. Of course, they didn't have television, but it wasn't just if you got paid for a thing. Everyone expressed themselves through some form of art, because really everyone does have some form of expression. Even if you sing like a dying chicken like I do, you have some form of artistic expression, and so I really appreciate your perspective and explaining it that way. Thank you so much for that.
Welcome back, and thank you for sticking with us. You've been listening to the Living Sugar-Free Lifestyle Show, and this is our third episode in the Creator Series. And today we've been talking with Daniel Chapman, but we're going to flash back, if you will. We had a question from one of our audience members and an online friend, and we got Brian to answer the question, but we're also going to circle back and have Daniel chime in on it as well. So this shout out is to a Instagram and Twitter friend. Her name is Lee Grissom, and she's the author of Saber 6. And actually, I'm going to be listening to that on audiobook, and I'll be sharing that with you because it sounds awesome and very adventurous. That's why I chose to do that one on audio. What better way to get in all the books you can other than to listen when you can't read, right? But then after Saber 6, there's a sequel book, and I'll tell you what that one is called in just a second. But she posed a question for Brian. And she said, I've seen how he has so many projects going on and has young warriors in the house. How does he balance out his time? I struggle with a day job among other annoyances. How does he make the time to write? Thanks in advance. And thank you, Lee, for sharing that question with us. Please do follow her on Twitter, The Critic, at I Am The Critic, as well as on Instagram. And her second book is called, I think I better listen to them in order. And she told me KLS 9 is first. And then after that, then there's Saber 6. Okay, so I'm going to be listening to those. And of course, I'll share my review with you all. And we're going to circle back, like I said. Oh, and you can also follow her on Instagram at _critic44. So we're going to circle back and we're going to let Brian answer that question. And then as well, Daniel's going to chime in on it as well. Because, if you guys want to know about balance, what better way than to get multiple perspectives, because we're all different. So thanks for sticking with us.
Hey guys, my friend Lee had asked how I balance work life as far as being able to write and be a creator and do all this amazing shit that I talk about doing in my interview. And the short and easy answer, I want to be flippant, but I don't have time. The short and easy answer is that I prioritize everything. For one thing, I'm retired military, so I don't, writing is my day job. For another thing, everything else I just prioritize according to what are the most important things to me and what I actually have time for. Family's most important, so they come first. The writing just kind of rolls around that. So do what you have to do for you.
So thanks so much to Brian for coming back and answering that question for us. So as I said, we're going to circle back to that, and we're going to let Daniel chime in on balance and creativity. But first, I want him to share with you a little bit about his music projects. We kind of were talking during the break, and he's got just an amazing passion and talent for music. Well, I'll just let him tell you more about it.
MEHJI.
Thank you. I was close.
Meji ENT.
Meji ENT.
So that goes back to my friends, who I call my brothers. They're very near and dear to my heart. So a special shout out to 117 Pope and Vuski and Trey 5Cast. I met these guys when I was in high school. And I kind of had started off doing music to impress my brother, and me and my brother made some goofy videos. And then I joined this Floetic Lyricist Club um, at the school I went to, Baltimore Polytechnic Institute. Um, they had this club where they would put on a concert every year, and they would get together all these groups of artists, playwrights and songstresses and everything you can imagine. So I joined because I wanted to push my artistic depths, and ended up pursuing music with a friend of mine, Delano Franklin, um, who kind of helped show me the ropes on how to like produce different things and whatnot. And then a year after I joined, in walks this group. They called themselves FGE, uh, whatever that stood for at the time, Fatal Gang Elite, I believe. But these three guys, they grew up as friends from well before I knew them. They were friends in like elementary school and middle school. And I just remember listening to these guys and being so impressed at what they did and the energy with which they did it. So I kind of like always kind of supported their path. And then at the time, I was working with my friend Delano on kind of starting a label of our own to show support to Baltimore artists and local artists, and trying to get the local art scene pushing and moving, because I kind of am a firm believer of independence. Um, I believe if someone out there has done it before, there's no reason why you can't do it. Might take a little bit extra work on figuring out how they did it, but you can certainly do it. So we kind of started doing this label thing because I was going to pursue music fully. Because I actually had a teacher in high school as I was graduating, and she kind of looked at me and she was like, "Where are you going, trouble?" I was a bit of a nuisance in high school, I will admit. But it was clear that my teachers didn't really believe that I was willing to succeed, or that I could. I actually sat down with my guidance counselor after everyone was supposed to have applied for college. And, I don't come from the greatest home background, single mom, poor neighborhoods, the works. And so I kind of had a lot of things on my mind that were, to me, seemed more important than applying to college at the time. And she just kind of looked at me and was like, "You need to apply somewhere, because I don't know where you think you're getting in, but this isn't it." So I took that as, let's apply to Harvard. Just to show, I actually got interviewed and got on the wait list. The only thing that kept
Nice.
the only thing that kept me from getting into Harvard was a FAFSA form that was filled out too late. They are serious.
Nice.
Funny. I know. I felt so good.
Well, I actually had a similar conversation with my guidance counselor, but I think I, in my head, did the same thing you did. Like, oh, everybody's going to college. I'm going to go to Boston University, even though I was a VC student that could have been a straight A student. And my guidance counselor told me that I was never going to get in. And I did. I did get in. But, I went to Spelman instead. But still, it's just the point. What you said, you can do whatever you want to do, if you just apply yourself, and you never know when that person is going to be placed at that desk that day to review, because that's where you're supposed to be.
Right. And I love that word, never. I actually ended up having the Harvard recruit, who was a Baltimore local, who owned an online journal, ended up having coffee with her at Starbucks. And she just loved me. She was like, "I will write this however I need to write this to get you in," and then offered me a job. And I was like, "This is beautiful."
Yes. I love that story.
So I actually ended up moving to Harrisburg to go to school and putting music up full time. And then was contacted
my junior year of college, by these guys from my junior year of high school who I hadn't talked to in years. I kind of noticed they were still doing the music thing, and they kind of looked at me and they were like, "Huh, you were kind of on to something with that whole do-it-yourself thing." And they kind of fell on hard times themselves, but then decided to band back together as a group and support each other, and decided to start this label. Meji ENT is kind of like a supportive group for literally all art. So I was like, you know what, that's something I can take and run with and support fully.
So what does Meji mean or stand for?
Meji is about family. It's about family and honesty and true love and support without judgment, without fear, without hesitation.
Wow. And where can the people go listen to this music? Tell us where they should start, where you want. Should they start with the website, or would you rather them go to YouTube or SoundCloud, or where do they go listen?
I would say go to Spinrilla. Go to spinrilla.com and search in Meji Leaks or Meji ENT. Either one is fine.
And you guys, we'll post the links after the show as well. But just in case you can't wait, you just go listen, because I've listened a little bit, and it's hearing the backstory. It's like, okay, now I understand why you get the feeling that you get when you listen.
Yeah, I absolutely fell in love. I was like, oh, yeah, this is something. I actually had quit music for a long time, and then I started thinking about doing it again because I was like, it's something I like doing. I shouldn't stop doing it just because I'm doing something that seems not related. And then these guys come in and they're like, do it all, just do it all. And I'm like, you know what? Okay.
So you're from the DMV area.
Yep. I was born in Delaware, raised here for 7 years, moved to Baltimore when I was about 7 years old, and then raised there until I was 18.
Wow. So basically it's weird because I'm from the DMV area, not born, but that's where all my family is from. I was actually born abroad, but so I'm in Virginia now. But Brian is in Baltimore area or DC, I think. Well, somewhere, DMV. I just say DMV because usually when we say DC, we're really not in DC. We're not really, it's just easier to say DMV. So, but you guys are talking on a very similar vibe. So that's interesting. You're a microbiologist and he's, didn't even want me to say it. So it's nuclear physicist. Okay. You're the author, musician. He's a filmmaker, and he's talking about creating his own studio because of the whole Hollywood drama and the issues that he's seen as a white male, but certainly the issues that I've had or that other people have had, and he said it just shouldn't be like that. And he said the only way we're going to change is if we create our own. So it was just listening to you talk and listening to him talk. I met you on Instagram and I met him on Twitter. So because of his interview, now he's coming over to Twitter. So I'm actually playing a little clip of his when we talked about balance, and I'm going to let you elaborate on this a little bit further. I really love what you said about being a polymath and really, tapping into a bunch of different areas, and how the scientist was also the writer and the musician. And he said that balance is really for him just about prioritizing. His family comes first. He's married and he's got 2 really cute kids. And, he said, and then all the other stuff is almost like you're filling in. And so how do you've got all that, we talked about your drive and your passion for it, but how do you balance the time, because, yeah, we all have the same 24 hours. Some of us sleep less than others do and get more done in the 24 hours, but how do you get it all done?
To, I guess, bounce off of what Brian was saying, that family aspect is really important. I think for me, it's I'm sure Brian as a physicist can agree. Einstein, definitely one of the greats. Theory of relativity time is definitely relative, and I believe space is also relative. And so there are times, and I'm pretty sure most people can agree that there are times, days where you just feel like, wow, this day was so long, or wow, this day was so short. I don't know what happened to it. Um, so for me, at least in my experience, spending time around my loved ones, or involving my loved ones, or thinking about my loved ones, kind of helps me expand my day a little bit, because I don't feel like I'm losing anything when I start to push, them to the side. And it's happened where I get so involved in a task, or I'm writing this poem obsessively, or writing this song obsessively. I get so involved in the task that I won't speak to anyone for days. And I'm like, wow, those days went by really quickly, and it feels like I got almost nothing done. And then there are days where I just like, I'll wake up and just, let's spend this first hour and a half, however long it takes, just holding my fiance. I'll spend 30 minutes bugging my older brother about something he probably doesn't care about. Uh, and then it just seems to ease the day from there, and things just seem to fall into place where it's like, okay, now I feel like I know what I should be doing next.
Oh my goodness. Okay, we have to just talk autism right now, because I swear, this clip right here, I'm going to replay this clip, this quote from you over and over again. That was such great wisdom and such great advice. And the introvert, not talking to people for days on end, that's like standard for me. I could do that. No big deal, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not married, again, you guys. So if you're married, you should not be not talking to people for days. But, if you have children, I'm not condoning that. But, when you're single, sometimes if you live by yourself at periods of time, I have before, it's no big deal for me. I try. What you just now said, I try to do that. When my sister and I have cohabitated together, or my mom or whoever, even for a period of time, they were laughing at me hysterically because I would wake up in the mornings and I would walk up to whoever's in the kitchen making coffee or whatever and give them a hug. And they're like, what are you doing? Not because that they don't like it, but because they know that's not me. And I'm like, I know y'all humans like love, hugs. So I'm trying to get better about hugging. And this is your good morning hug. Good morning, And so we had a little thing for a little while we would do. The amount of clarity and energy, and if you will, just feel goods that you have to be able to accomplish a task when you give that love is mind-blowing, and it can make those hours in the day seem more productive and more, not go by as fast, if you will.
Yep, absolutely.
That was so profound. Wow, thank you so much for sharing that with us, because I'm a part of a lot of autism communities, and I wonder if those of us who are late diagnosed, if the people who were diagnosed young have a harder time with it. I mean, certainly we have our own issues, and growing up, having conflict with people and not understanding what that thing about you is that people want you to change that you can't change, and then having to not care. That's a whole nother, thing. And certainly knowing, you have that explanation, but I wonder maybe if people who are diagnosed early maybe have a harder road with the whole stigma and label of what they're not good at and what they can't do and whatever, as opposed to us who we were just around other people who just had to not care and be yourself and play your hard role or whatever type of thing that people put on to get through this society. We had to do that, right, as opposed to having an excuse not to. And, I'm not social. I'm not a social person. I don't bite my tongue about it. I don't feel no kind of ways about it. I am who I am. But I recognize that other humans need certain things, and it's almost like doing a kindness to give it to them.
Right.
So instead of kind of licking our wounds and crying about being autistic and different, maybe we could just, as much as we don't like hugs, do your good deed for the day, do your kind act for the day, and go give somebody a hug, even if it's, your mom or your kid or whoever, just because, that's what other people need. Because if we want people to be accepting of us and bend for us. Certainly we can bend in the areas that we can bend. I mean, I can't change my personality, but I can certainly give you a hug, even though it's makes my skin crawl or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
I love that. That's so great.
I grew up, both of my brothers are non-neurotypical. My younger brother was actually diagnosed with Asperger's when he was younger. And my older brother was diagnosed with ADHD. Um, so like we were in and out of therapy a lot as a group because my mom is also diagnosed bipolar and multiple personality disorder and PTSD. But so like I've been in and out of therapist's office, and I guess because of how I am as a person compared to my brothers, um, almost every therapist kind of looked at me and was like, okay, that's the normal one. That's the normal.
Right.
And
right.
my mom would be like, oh, you know, he's the one who doesn't give me problems. So like,
Right.
I spent my whole life thinking like, okay, I'm normal. I'm normal. What's wrong? Like I'm normal, but I don't feel normal. Like what's up? Like there are
Right.
some things up. So like there's actually I've been working on this, I guess this article piece I've been trying to write because I find it very important. That's why I appreciate what you do. I love your book, by the way. I really appreciate
Thank
what you
you.
do. I think bringing awareness is important because ASD it's a spectrum, and we all like fall on different points along the
Yes.
spectrum, and those experiences like they differ vastly, but those differences can kind of either hurt or so I've been working on this article called normal is not neurotypical because I had a hard
Yes.
time coming to those terms honestly because I'm like, okay, I've been told I was normal my whole life, and now I'm learning some things about me that aren't necessarily neurotypical, and then I realized that people kind of use those terms interchangeably.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, so like my brother's definitely not neurotypical, my older brother, but he's an extrovert for sure. He loves affection, physical affection, and he gives lots of hugs. Like that's his love language.
Mm-hmm.
And I cringe honestly I do, and he knows it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like if he's just feeling some type of way where he just needs to hug his little brother,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm going to clam up and
Mm-hmm.
turn into a brick, and my fist might ball up, and I might look at him like he's stupid until he releases.
Mm-hmm.
But I let him latch on and hug me and hold me as long as he needs to. And you know, if it gets too uncomfortable for me, he'll respect that, and you know,
Yeah.
he'll release and back off. But you know, it's definitely something I do believe that kind of growing up without the label kind of helped me overcome some of those things. And I used to get very, uh, I guess, agitated as a kid. You know, my mom used to, oh, you're just being sensitive. Oh, he's just so
Mm-hmm.
sensitive. Like,
Mm-hmm. Me too. Mm-hmm.
and, you know, and I would have these feelings. I just didn't know how to describe them.
Mm-hmm.
How to verbalize, hey, you're being too much. Could you just chill for a sec?
Right.
So, you know, it would turn into crying and tears and then
Yep.
nothing. And then growing up in the family that I grew up in, it usually just resulted in, okay, I'm going to make this a lot worse for myself if I continue to push this issue. So I'll just say nothing and learn how to
Yes.
react to their behavior.
Yes.
So I think I think you quoted it. This is actually how we met. You quoted it on my Instagram post. I posted about my grandmother forcing me to eat, and that quote has become like my life motto. Too well adjusted to be autistic,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because it is. For a long time I thought it was something wrong with me, being told that, hey, you know, now you fall on this spectrum, and these are some things you should watch for. And but as I learned more about myself and more about what ASD is, and then interact with more people in the community. I've come to the realization that there's nothing wrong. There may be some tendencies that I guess neurotypical people don't find okay for their space, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just learning how to interact with one another in an efficient and healthy manner. That way, everybody's space is being respected.
That was such an amazing and insightful perspective, and just wow. You know, talking to different people with different perspectives is so valuable. And I hope you appreciate Daniel's perspective as much as I did. We're going to be back after the break with more from Daniel Chapman, author, musician, microbiologist. This is good, y'all.
When I set my proper boundaries, a neurotypical person doesn't even have the opportunity to experience my weirdness in a way that they don't like. Do you know what I mean when I say that? Usually, I'm uncomfortable or annoyed or think that people have said something god awful. The way that most humans treat each other is just totally disgusting to me. That overly sensitive, quote unquote, that you mentioned. I would never talk to people the way that some people do. The way that a lot of neurotypical people treat autistic people is just heinous to me. The way that people treat each other between races, all that. And I'm not even just talking about quote unquote white supremacists. The way that I see black people treating white people sometimes is just heinous to me. And, people, certainly people who are from other countries and just all of this. And so what I realized is usually I'm annoyed by you before you're annoyed by me. So if I'm truly being myself genuinely, then I'm not going to force myself further into discomfort with you. And then you never even have to deal with my meltdown.
Right.
Now that I have the choices, I'm not being dragged around as a little kid going places that make me uncomfortable. I mean, if the lights are too bright in the grocery store, I'm getting out of here. If the smells are funny, I'm leaving, or whatever the thing is, And even now I find myself forgetting to respect my own boundaries. And sometimes I get tricked into conversations and then I end up having to read people. But even in that, I don't feel bad about it because I'm like, okay, you were wrong, were wrong. And I should have cussed you out 20 minutes ago. But I didn't, and I don't want to now. So I'm just going to remove myself from the situation.
Right.
So I really, really appreciate your perspective. And I'm definitely going to be sharing this with my autism community because people get mad at me, I think, because maybe I make it sound too easy sometimes, but I don't mean to, and it's not easy. And they're sort of kind of negating my struggle because the whole too well adjusted to be autistic is basically saying, you think I'm behaving myself. You think that I'm acting, quote unquote, with etiquette or, into whatever box you want me to fit into, but you have no idea of what's going on inside of me or what things make me uncomfortable or how hard I had to fit into that box. I'm standing here with all this loud noise and music and people are hollering and whatever. And because I'm not screaming and ranting and raving, then I'm well adjusted. But that's not okay. It's not okay to want anyone to be uncomfortable like that, and you shouldn't like, oh, it's okay if you're uncomfortable as long as you know how to act. That's horrible.
Right.
And we got to stop doing that to children and, parents of autistic children and adults. Stop doing that to them. Stop putting people in situations that are going to cause them a meltdown repeatedly. It's horrible. The simple things like not dragging your kid from store to store to store after eating macaroni and cheese and candy, no decent food. The lights are bright, all the adults are hollering, and then you're wondering why the kid had a meltdown. It's cruel, and yeah, so this is so refreshing. Thank you so much. And even in having these discussions, it's difficult because, people just can't relate. I mean, most people wouldn't think it was a big deal to go to the doctor and all of a sudden, surprise, take your clothes off. Huh? What do you mean? I usually need a few days to work myself up to that. What do you mean? Okay, so tell me, what is the next project for you? And that goes for music and books, because, if you're taking requests.
I actually planned on enjoying the response that I've been getting from people who have been reading Teach a Girl to Fish, and then understanding what that book means. The first book was written completely unintentional. It was like my personal relation with my grandfather just seemed to translate to something a lot of other people could relate to. But
So good. Oh, that you guys, I don't care how old you are and if you have kids or not, can you find a four-leaf clover? Took me back to my childhood looking for four-leaf clovers. I mean, I literally was having flashbacks. It was so good.
and then Teach a Girl to Fish was intentionally written the with my future child in mind, along with I have like 11 nieces, with all of my nieces in mind, with all of my nephews in mind, understanding I'm all about, especially with the late diagnosis and everything, and then growing up the way I grew up, I'm all about boxes being broken. Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't try and force someone into this ideology that you think they should be, because we are all unique individuals at the end of the day. We all have something to contribute. And when we start to forget that or start to overlook that, that's when humanity starts to break down. Humanity lives inside of all of that artisticness. And recently I've been enjoying saying autisticness.
I love it.
I think, you know, those differences that we try to avoid or we try to like wipe out so that we could all be this cookie cutter. Well, let's make sure it fits for everyone, and let's make sure it's okay. You know, you just have to suffer knowing this. And I grew up. A lot of people joke that I'm kind of a feminist. I grew up in a family of women. My grandmother would beat me senseless if I ever thought the wrong way. I have this joke with my fiance because she's a very uh, rough person,
Hmm.
um, but she grew up in a family of boys. Uh,
She's gangsta Barbie.
absolutely, absolutely.
That's my big sister is too. She's gangsta Barbie. She always was beating people up for me left and right for breakfast, lunch, and dinner when we were growing up.
So she would like.
But she's the prissier one though. She's more girly than I am, but she's the gangster Barbie too.
So I tell her like I picture her running around with her, boy cousin screaming King Sam. Uh, so I'm like, look, you're a king. And then we have a friend who actually match made us, who calls me a queen from time to time because I am flamboyant in a lot of things that I do. It's part of my personality. And I'm like, you know what? Girls can be rough, boys can be sensitive.
That's right.
Like, we need to start encouraging these things, because when you tell them they can't, then you end up with these boys who are sensitive and these girls who are rough, who are growing up thinking that they're wrong.
That's right. And thinking that it means something more than what it means. Just because you're a guy and no, and how white people say my best friend is black. I have a lot of best friends who are gay. So this is not any negative statement against gay. But I do know a guy who, and some people say that, this is impossible, but I just choose to believe people when they tell me their story. But he's married and has children now. And for a long time, he thought he was gay because that's what everybody told him about himself, because he's flamboyant and he likes fashion and he's really gorgeous. And, and that it doesn't mean that. And if that means it to you, then that's what it means to you. But you can't just put that label on somebody just because they like art or fashion or whatever. And we got to stop doing that.
Right. Like, labels are terrible. Like, they tear people apart. Like, especially like kids. Like, that's what it's about. It's like, for me, it's about, as I was writing Teach a Girl to Fish, I was sitting there writing, and I wrote maybe the first two stanzas, and then I started thinking about, okay, when my little girl gets to the next stage of life, what do I want her to understand? when my nieces get to that next stage of life, what do they understand? What do I want them to understand? I have a little sister who is 15 now. When she gets to the next stage of life, I want them to understand so much more about who they are and be so comfortable in who they are that nobody can tear that away from them.
Mm-hmm.
I know my family. I know my sisters. I know my grandmother. So I know that my nieces are, I have a little. She just turned 2-year-old niece, who, punches on her brother and runs around and rolls in dirt and all of these things. And I'm like, if we're gonna encourage one child to do this, and my family admittedly is good at this. They definitely encourage all of it. But then she's going to get outside of these walls and hear, oh, little girls don't do that. Little girls shouldn't be that way. So it became very apparent to me that, maybe this is something that I should continue, because these are problems that are continuous.
How about, first I wanted to tell you that we were talking about that as well the other day. I was saying that I think that all white people should be anti-white supremacy. I think all men should be feminists, but I think that Black people should take the high road. Do you know what I mean? Whoever the underdog is, it's your job to take the high road, but whoever's on the other side, it's your job to be, does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And the other thing I wanted to say from what you said, the next book, and if you do a series, I mean, certainly you can do, can you teach a girl to this and that and the other, but what about, can you teach a boy to knit?
Oh, absolutely. I am taking that as a
since you're
request.
bringing your grandparents in, and like your grandma could be teaching the boy, because I have seen some men that knit that are just, oh my goodness. So it's like such a Zen thing to do, and it teaches life lessons and all that, like you said. So yeah, I knit. So that's why I came up with that idea.
I'm definitely taking that as a formal request.
Excellent. Well, Daniel, is there anything else that, hold on. Let me look at my list and make sure I didn't miss nothing. And if somebody asks questions, Daniel, I'm definitely going to send you the link for messages. Like, you can come back and fill us back in on anything. Or if you have any like new projects or announcements, or when your book comes out, or new songs. Oh, I know. Here's a big question. We talked about balance, and we talked about, how you hold it all together and this and that and the other, but a lot of writers and musicians experience writer's block. And I think for me, I don't have so much of a hard time with that. Like, I might not be able to focus on the one project that I'm writing, but I can always go write something and work on something else. Do you experience that writer's block issue with music or with, literature? And if so, how do you get past it?
I believe that it's something that I might, but I do so much. So if I have, my brain is just always constantly going. But so if I have something that pops, or I'm working on something, and I have something, I get to a point where I'm like, oh, I can't continue with this. Then something else will pop up in my head, and I guess that's me trying to force it. But I know that I'm trying to force it. So I'll completely take it somewhere else. I'm like, oh, this doesn't really go with this song. I guess this song is dead right now. But this little 2 sentences that popped up would make for a really great poem, or the beginning of a really great story. And then sometimes I'll start to write that, and then I'll look at that and be like, you know what? That actually did work there in that song. Let me go back.
Yes. Okay, so I think we kind of solved the issue for everyone, because, and just listening to different people speak on this and what I do personally, I think that when we talk about that polymath thing where you're a scientist and I don't want to say scientist in this perspective. I want to say inventor. You're an inventor and you're a musician, you're an artist, you're a writer. You've got all these different ideas in various lanes kind of swirling around and fighting their way to the top all the time. And when you tap into all of those things, keep your notebooks, have your notebooks on your computer, your print notebooks, whatever, and you allow yourself to let those ideas flow, you never really experience a block, because A, you're always doing something different. So it's kind of refreshing to get back to writing that story. But B, if you experience a block, then it's just not the time to work on that thing right now. It's time to work on that other thing that's calling
Right.
your name.
I think this is where it definitely comes back to boxes. I think as humans just love their boxes so much, society loves their boxes so much that we've taught people to put themselves into boxes. Uh, and being an
Mm-hmm.
artist is literally working outside of the box. So when you find yourself
Mm-hmm.
doing that, I think writer's block is just now that society voice saying, "Hey, you're too far outside of the box. Let's revisit the box." Uh, so we feel the need
Mm-hmm.
to put ourselves back there. And I think honestly, just keep pushing with it is the way to go. Just keep. We're dynamic
Mm-hmm.
people. Be a dynamic
Mm-hmm.
person.
That's so awesome. Well, is there anything else that you want to leave the audience with, or anything that you maybe have going on or coming up, or anything that you wanted to share that I didn't think to
Upcoming
ask?
projects. I have a mixtape coming out October 31st. It is my grandmother's birthday. She was born on Halloween. Uh, yeah, I always
Oh,
figure that's probably
wow.
why she's so scary. But I have a mixtape coming out called Cell Perfect, a little play on the whole science art thing. I'm a huge nerd. I love Dragon Ball Z. Um, so it's a little play on that, a little play on perfecting whatever lane we get into, music specifically. Again, it's
Mm-hmm.
my brother's favorite thing in the world. He loves it. He loves the evolution of it. And we talk every day about, what music is now, what music used to be, and what makes music great in general. So Cell Perfect is kind of my last few songs of as I've been trying to work the process of me trying to master it and learning as much as I can. It's me putting the application of everything that I've learned into each song and trying to blend what I do with what I'm trying to do. And then I have a bit of a novel I've been working on. I've been publishing them as short stories. It's a sci-fi short I publish on Vocal Media. Um, Vocal
On
Media,
where?
vocal.media. I encourage
Okay.
every
Okay.
writer to go check it out and write on it. It's awesome. But it's called Projection. Um, I grew up in a very, 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 very Christian household. Um, and my grandfather kind of made sure that I had a very strong spiritual connection. He made sure that
Southern Baptist or
AME.
AME or what?
So
Okay.
I grew up with a closeness to God and religion in general. And when I lost my grandfather, I kind of felt like I lost a piece of that, but I didn't want to lose my spirituality altogether.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a lot of research into
Mm-hmm.
everything that I could involving religion. Uh, and I like to keep an open mind on things and try and learn. But what I learned as I read through each of the world's religions and philosophies is that it all came down to one thing, and that's the one thing that my grandfather always, always tried to push and instill, and that is true and honest, selfless love.
Yes.
And I was like,
Agape.
okay. So then I started like approaching learning religion from that aspect, ended up falling in love with Buddhism as a philosophy. Um, and
Okay.
then started experimenting with things like astral projection and things of that nature, and understanding that our spirit uh, is kind of the powerhouse of our body. It's the thing that moves us. Um, but it's very real and very alive. And I have kind of these ideas floating around about it and kind of how I interpret um, some of the stories that I've been told growing up and some of the ways that religion has been perverted over the years to make sure we were fighting each
Mm-hmm.
other and not loving selflessly. So
Right.
I kind of tried to wrap that all
Right.
into this interesting story. It started off as this kind of homage to my fiance and how she brought me back uh, from the depths of my mind, uh, and kind of how I like always knew she was the one. Because
Uh-huh.
I do believe in love. I'm a sappy love person. And I tell her all the time. I actually used to have this dream about this faceless woman. Never had a face, never pictured a face. I only saw, I guess, her soul. Like I saw what she
Mm-hmm.
was, and I knew she was meant to be in my life because I kept having this recurring dream about her. And then when I met her, when I met my fiance in college, I kind of felt like that picture was complete. That I met who I was supposed to meet, and from there we've been inseparable ever since. And she certainly helped me grow in every way possible. So I kind of started penning this story as a way to, because I kind of use poetry and writing as a way to explain better. That's kind of how it started. You know, I knew I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't good at explaining things when I was young. So it was kind of my way of explaining that complex thought process of, hey, you're the one. I don't know how to really say
Mm-hmm.
that you've been the woman of my dreams since day one, but you have been. Um, and then it took on this life of its own, as stories typically do. And I started throwing all of these different things in there. So projection is coming soon to an Amazon near you.
I look forward to that, definitely. I think that I read a post where you were writing about her, and I just thought it was the sweetest, and I could just tell that she has a very, I'm big on when we talk about balance and how you get a lot of stuff done and people who have families and all that, and I'm big on people not compartmentalizing their lives. And if you run a business, certainly find a way to incorporate your significant other or your family, or spend as much time together as you can. So it really was very heartwarming the way that you talked about her. And it's nice to see that you're not just producing music or writing books. You're taking a very holistic, well-rounded approach to it. And that's what I've been finding in this awesome writing community. Shout out to the writing community, because if I hadn't tapped into this little hashtag on Twitter and Instagram, I would not know all of these amazing people. But the thing that I'm starting to see is that, and based on what you've been talking about, I'm not even going to say writers and authors, because we all have that in us. So I'm going to say, when you tap into your inner author and your inner writer, it kind of gives you sort of a, I guess, more compassion for the world. I don't even know if that's what it is, but I'm seeing this awesome energy among all of the authors that I've been meeting, in this sort of passion, just kind of for leaving something. Of course, not everybody, we're not all going to fit into it, but for the most part, it kind of taps you into this sort of this thing that's inside of you to want to leave the world something of value,
Right.
if you will.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I look forward to your next book, and I look forward to hearing this mixtape when it comes out. And we're going to share the links for everything that you talked about. Of course, I'll tag the show and tag you, and try to share as much stuff as I remember, but feel free to also tag and add anything that we might have forgotten to talk about, because I want all of you guys to follow on Twitter, Danny Deuce, and it's DUE,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
DUECE, right? And then on Instagram, it's 1202 Deuce, DUECE. And then on Amazon, follow Daniel Chapman and go and get these two awesome books, you guys, and really, really support him and support his efforts. You guys see that he's helping others and paying it forward. And you guys, these are the kind of people that we want to support. So share this interview, tell somebody, tell a musician, artist who needs to be inspired, tell a writer who needs to be inspired, tell somebody who autistic who needs to be inspired, you guys. this is some good word and some good wisdom. And I thank you so much for being with me today and for sharing your time and your wisdom. I just really appreciate you, and I'm honored. And I mean, you bowled me over because I was already impressed and thought you were an awesome guy, but I had no idea that it was going to be this good. We've never talked before, y'all. I didn't know he was this awesome of a presenter, or, you know, speaking of which, do you do speaking presentations, any type of group presentations at all right now?
I do not. I don't.
Well, we'll be adding that to the list just as soon as I get a chance to. So yeah, I'm going to make it my business to make sure that wherever I can get my foot in the door, you know, especially if it's with a writing community, autistic community, or music people, I'm going to have you, because your perspective is so refreshing, and probably a few more areas I can think of. But you guys, TXNL support. I'm going to, you know, some of us writers don't do a whole lot of social media. But he's a little bit more social than I am. So I'll definitely tag you with TXNL so you guys can find him. A lot of our autistic people in our community, you guys, y'all hear Fifi? I knew she was going to get going. Can you hear her? Fifi, you're not supposed to do it in front of company. She does this little thing where she gets her toys or her bone, and she starts running the obstacle course. She's going around the dining room table, around the living room table, under the chair, under the couch. Ooh, and then walking between me and the cord. So just shift wrong move, she'll just snatch everything off the table. So Fifi is our co-host for the show, because she might on any random day just start barking or whining or whatever. I don't edit it. I just say, hey, y'all say hey to Fifi. Do you have pets?
I have a cat named Callie.
Oh,
I don't know. She was a stray that my fiance brought her home because we had talked about getting a cat. We had wanted an animal because she deals with anxiety very heavy. And then with the diagnosis of my autism and being able to understand that there was you know, some things there we could talk about and work on. We decided to get this kitten. We actually found this kitten and brought her home, nursed her back to health. She kind of had a eye infection and wasn't doing so well, but it taught me to be gentler, and it kind of taught her to ease up a little bit, or gave her someone to talk to that would just listen when I wasn't there. I love my Callie. I love my Callie.
I love it. That's so awesome. See, y'all, add that to the list. We could do this all day. I appreciate your time so much. And I might even ask you back during the series if you don't mind.
Absolutely. I love being here. Thank you.
Awesome. You guys, y'all have been listening to the Living Sugar-Free Lifestyle Show, Andrea in the Morning, with my new friend, Daniel Chapman. You guys, 1202 Deuce, or Danny Deuce on Twitter. You guys follow him, shout him out, tell him how much you appreciate this interview. And I look forward to talking to you guys again next week. We're going to have Daniel back with us again. Thank you so much, Daniel. You have a great evening.